Listen carefully, because this is not just a story. This is a journey into fear, courage, language, and the quiet power of words. He was born into a life where no one expected greatness, not because he lacked intelligence, not because he lacked imagination, but because the world around him had already decided what his future would look like. His name was Elijah Moore. He came into the world on a rainy night in a small industrial town where factories never slept and dreams were often postponed forever. The town had one main road, a few grocery stores, and rows of identical houses built for workers who spent their lives trading time for survival. People here didn't talk about passion. They talked about paychecks. They didn't talk about creativity. They talked about security. Elijah's father worked at a steel factory. His hands were rough, his back always aching, his silence heavy. His mother cleaned offices and homes, leaving early in the morning and returning late in the evening with tired eyes and gentle hands. They loved their son deeply, but love alone does not teach a child how to dream when no one around him is dreaming. Elijah grew up in a house without many books. There were no bedtime stories filled with magic or heroes. There were no conversations about ideas or possibilities. Life was practical. Life was about getting through the day. From the beginning, Elijah was different. He listened more than he spoke. He noticed things others ignored. He paid attention to how people's voices changed when they were angry, tired, or afraid. He noticed how silence could sometimes speak louder than words, but when it came time for him to speak, his throat would tighten. At school, this became a problem. Teachers wanted answers. Classrooms rewarded loud confidence, quick responses, and perfect grammar. Elijah had thoughts, many of them, but they moved slowly, carefully, like fragile glass. By the time he was ready to speak, someone else had already answered. When he did speak, his words often came out wrong. Sentences broke in the middle. Pronunciation failed him. Grammar betrayed him. And laughter followed. Children can be cruel without realizing it. Some laughed openly. Some whispered. Some simply stopped listening. Soon, Elijah learned a dangerous lesson. Silence felt safer. He stopped raising his hand. He stopped trying. He started believing that words were not meant for him. At home, no one noticed. His parents were exhausted. Teachers labeled him quiet, average, forgettable. No one asked what was happening inside his mind. But inside Elijah, stories were forming. Scenes played out in his imagination. Conversations he wished he could have. Speeches he rehearsed in his head but never spoke aloud. In his mind, words flowed beautifully. On his tongue they stumbled. As years passed, the gap grew wider. By the time Elijah reached his teenage years, the world felt loud and fast, and he felt slow and invisible. English classes were the worst. Reading out loud terrified him. Writing assignments came back covered in red ink. One teacher once wrote, "You need to try harder." Elijah stared at those words for a long time. He was trying. He just didn't know how. Everything changed one evening when the power went out. It was winter. The house grew quiet in a way Elijah wasn't used to. No television, no factory noise drifting through the window. Just darkness and the sound of rain. Searching for a candle, Elijah opened an old box in the storage room. Inside were forgotten things, tools, papers, and at the bottom, a small notebook. It wasn't new. The cover was torn. The pages were yellow. Curious, Elijah opened it. What he found surprised him. It wasn't a story. It wasn't poetry. It was a diary. The handwriting was messy, the grammar imperfect, the sentences short and broken. The writer talked about fear, failure, embarrassment, and dreams that felt impossible. The writer talked about being afraid to speak. Elijah felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he wasn't reading words that judged him. He was reading words that understood him. That night, Elijah did something he had never done before. He wrote, not for school, not for marks, not for anyone else. He wrote for himself. The words were clumsy, the spelling wrong, the sentences uneven, but they were honest. He wrote about his fear of speaking. He wrote about feeling invisible. He wrote about wanting to be heard. When he finished, he didn't feel smarter. He felt lighter. The next day, he wrote again, and the next. At first, it was just a few lines, then paragraphs, then pages. He didn't worry about rules. He didn't worry about perfection. He focused on one thing only, putting his thoughts somewhere safe. Slowly, something unexpected happened. The more he wrote, the more he read. The more he read, the more he understood. The more he understood, the less afraid he felt. Words stopped being enemies. They became tools. They became bridges. Years passed. Elijah grew older. Life remained difficult. Money was tight. Opportunities were limited. But one thing had changed forever. He no longer believed he was incapable. He knew learning was slow. He knew fear would return. But he also knew something else. Progress didn't need permission. In college, Elijah struggled. He failed presentations. He froze during discussions. But he kept writing. Journals turned into essays. Essays turned into articles. One day, a professor returned his paper without red ink. Instead, there was a note. You have a voice. Don't hide it. Elijah stared at those words, his hands shaking. No one had ever said that to him before. From that moment, he began saying yes to fear, yes to presentations, yes to speaking, yes to being uncomfortable. His voice shook. His accent showed. His mistakes were visible. But he didn't stop. After graduation, Elijah didn't become rich. He didn't become famous overnight. He worked ordinary jobs. He kept writing. He shared his thoughts online. At first, no one noticed. Then one person commented. Then another. People said his words made them feel understood. That his honesty mattered. That his struggle sounded like theirs. Years later, Elijah stood on a small stage holding a microphone. His hands trembled, but his voice didn't disappear. He spoke about fear, about language, about the power of imperfect words. The audience listened. Some cried, some nodded, some recognized themselves. Elijah realized something profound that day. He had never needed to be perfect. He had only needed to be real. Today, Elijah teaches others how to find their voice, not by promising perfection, but by encouraging persistence. He reminds them that language is not a gate that keeps people out. It is a path that opens slowly, step by step. This story is not about becoming famous. It is about becoming free. Free from fear. Free from silence. Free from the lie that you are not enough. If you are listening to this and doubting yourself, remember this. Every confident voice you admire was once unsure. Every powerful speaker once struggled to speak. Every strong writer once wrote weak sentences. Your beginning does not define your ending. Your willingness to continue does. So start. Speak badly. Write poorly. Learn slowly. But never stop, because the world does not need another perfect voice.